Welcome to the Color of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Many of us are feeling a wide range of emotions: sadness, anger, fear, sometimes hopelessness and helplessness. This season, we will be exploring all the feelings and ways to empower each other to take action. So, let's go. Game on. Norman Chen is the Chief Executive Officer of the Asian American Foundation, TAAF, and brings a 30-year career in entrepreneurship, healthcare, and community leadership in the United States and Asia. Norman is passionate about building organizations in both the nonprofit and private sectors that positively impact society. Prior to his appointment at TAAF, Norman co-founded the nonprofit Leading Asian Americans to Unite for Change and helped to create a landmark study, the Status Index, of American attitudes towards Asian Americans. As a healthcare entrepreneur, Norman was the founder and CEO of Asia Renal Care, a network of specialty medical centers in 6 countries, and co-founder of Delta Health Hospital, a world-class hospital in partnership with Columbia Heart Source. As a venture capitalist, Norman led successful life sciences investments. Norman grew up on the East Coast and currently lives in the Bay Area. He has been a board or advisory council member at various organizations. He holds a BS degree from MIT and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. So Norman, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It has been a long time wish for me to talk with someone from the Asian American Foundation.
Thanks. Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, well, let's jump into it because you've had an amazing career. What's led you to become involved in TAAF and the initiatives that you guys have been participating in?
Well, as you mentioned, Stephanie, I've been working for a long time. I was in healthcare and venture capital for most of my career. And I spent 20 years in Asia, actually, as part of my own kind of journey to understand more about my Asian American background. But when 2020, 2021 came around, I think with all the anti-Asian hate, we're all trying to figure out, given the fortunate position that we've been in, our parents are immigrants, we now live in great neighborhoods, have good jobs, went to good schools. How can we start to give back when our community was getting attacked? And so a bunch of friends and I created a small nonprofit called Launch, Leading Asian Americans to Unite for Change, another great Asian American acronym. And we started just to do work in the community. We ended up providing funding for getting out the vote for Asian American voters. We also came up with a very important breakthrough study called the Status Index, which talked about perceptions of Asian Americans and how that led many times to prejudice that could lead to scapegoating and then actually to violence, which we saw tragically during COVID. And so that just got me really activated and excited about working in the community. And then when TAAF was looking for a senior person to help lead the organization, somebody who had a strong business background, but also experience in the nonprofit sector, it was a great match.
Absolutely. And, a lot of us were impacted, not only seeing footage and, there were reporting systems of our relatives being at risk. I had a friend whose grandma was brutally beaten and passed away. And so it wasn't one of those things that didn't touch us in some emotional way. How important was this, and what emotional ties and mental health ties did you have to saying, you know what, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get involved in, at the ground level?
Well, the work is so personal to me, and my whole life as an Asian American, I've always thought about kind of my Asian American identity. And so when, again, our community was attacked, I just felt like I had to do something, had to give back. And so it was very personal, very emotional for me. The work that we do in mental health, Stephanie, is even more important, or as important to me as other work that we do, because, I have kids who were teenagers just recently. We live near Palo Alto, where there's been such a spike in teenage suicides. And as a parent, it just breaks my heart to think about those kinds of incidents. And so raising awareness, number one, through our research, but also convening our community to talk, many for the first time, about mental health for our youth just felt really, really important to me. So yes, this is very personal and meaningful to me, to myself.
Definitely. My oldest is going to be 14 next month, and
Oh,
yeah, the emotional intelligence people are like, "Oh, your mom's a psychologist." I get it when you're like talking to people. And so it is really important that we are teaching our children those coping skills. And like you're mentioning, suicide rates are high in various Asian American communities and even in Asian countries. So, what have you kind of seen through, cross-cultural, international, and, national the state of mental health among Asians and Asian Americans, with the caveat that it's not generalizing across the groups?
yeah. I mean, everybody who's Asian American has Asian American parents, right? And we all remember kind of the pressures that we felt and also the gaps we felt because they came from a different culture. And there was not only the generation gap, there was the cultural gap. Recently, at one of our events called Creating Space, we had people write down via this online app the energy they felt when they were kids in their family, and it was incredible. Most of the words related to pressure and stress, obligation. There was, food, which was important for us growing up, but a lot of the memories I think we all have growing up as kids was just kind of the pressure and the expectations we're trying to face. And so I think it's a common feeling for many in our community, especially in the Asian American community. Our study really started with just this incredibly tragic statistic that suicide is the leading cause of death for Asian American youth.
Mm.
And then diving deeper, our study that interviewed over 1,000 or was conducted with over 1,000 Asian American youth across the country had a few key headlines. Number one was that 30% of Asian American youth across the country, according to our study, had attempted or planned suicide, which is just a shocking number, and that 50% displayed moderate to severe depression-like symptoms. I mean, you in your practice, I'm sure, have a lot of data as well, but just to see that come out from our data and also to recognize that that is higher than, almost all other groups out there in America, it just really caused alarm for all of us and made us therefore want to come together and try to find solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, I started my practice, and many Asian Americans came for the first time ever to therapy. And I think that that is really important. And the reason why I actually went into psychology is because I went to Lowell High School in San
Oh,
Francisco.
wow.
So you could imagine it's not just like outward pressure, but there's covert pressure too, right? All my peers are doing really well.
Mhm.
Everyone's expected to go to college. And one of our friends' brothers committed suicide.
My goodness.
And, it's one of those things where there was no mental health discussion or research or resources. And I realized like we need more providers that look like us
Yeah.
and to build that trust and the professional relationship. And so the podcast was really born because one, I love free stuff. So I took like a free podcasting class when we had nothing else to do. And then I was like, well, I can't really see everyone one on one. How do we
Yeah.
give these resources out to more people? And hopefully that will help them engage in therapy. So knowing that the suicide rates are high or attempts and that depressive symptoms are high as well, what do you think we can do to engage youth in these conversations?
Well, certainly we need to provide the therapy to those who are able to access it, and hopefully to have qualified, culturally competent therapists like yourself give the care. So that's critical. But as you know, mental health is such a major issue for our community and for our country that we need to find other ways to help more people. And that's why we think trying to find community-based, scalable solutions is really important.
Yes.
So at our recent Youth Mental Health Summit in San Francisco, we brought together groups from all over the country to share what they're doing, different kinds of community-based care to help people deal with, mental health issues. And so we had people talk about sports and Dragon Boat and how that was really a great way to bring people together in San Francisco and the Bay Area. Oftentimes troubled youth or youth at risk to come together and learn the discipline, enjoy the physical aspect of Dragon Boat, but then the very important team aspect and social aspect of being part of a broader group. And if one person's not paddling well, then the whole boat's in trouble, right? And so that collective energy was really, really important. Just the team spirit that's built. Other groups use writing therapy to help people express their thoughts for the first time. It's just beautiful to hear different solutions and inspiring because, this can be a challenging topic to talk about oftentimes. Just today, I had lunch with somebody who went to one of the Palo Alto high schools. They spoke about also one of their friends taking their life. And just then this whole stigma that surrounded youth in Palo Alto at the time and how that became their identity. If you went to college afterwards and they knew you were from Palo Alto, they'd be, oh, are you one of those kids that, dealt with teenage suicides? And it became, even more oppressive in a way, this topic. And so how do you help to try to find other ways to talk about it in a healthy way? I think is really, really important. Yeah, we're very keen to work with wonderful groups around the country. Our motto at TAAF is to look at a problem, do a lot of research, understand the data, convene and brainstorm with existing players and providers to try to find solutions, and then to try to pilot or look at some pilots in the space that have had some impact, determine proof of concept, and then scale over time. So it's really trying to use like this design theory model or venture capital model of trying to find the best solutions that look promising and then scaling them when they prove to be effective.
So let's talk about parenting because generationally things have slightly changed. I mean, we have the privilege of choosing what we wanted to do. I mean, I'm a weirdo. I'm the only one who went to graduate school in my family of four. But how do we manage expectations for our children? Because before it was like doctor, lawyer, etc., and software engineer, and now things have really changed. I mean, back then we didn't have content creators or, people in entertainment that looked like us. So how do we do that?
Yeah, and in our study, and what we thought, we asked people, what are the biggest pressures for you as a teenager or a youth? We thought parents would be at the top of the list because, we all know the stories about Asian American tiger parents. Parents actually came in number 3 on our list in terms of pressures. Number 1 on the list was self-pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's now so normalized that their expectations, especially if you live in an area like the Bay Area, right, about what schools you need to get into. And one of my colleagues who used to teach Asian American history at the University of Maryland said a lot of kids, and I'm from Maryland, so I think University of Maryland is a great school, but people would say a lot of the Asian American kids going into Maryland said they felt like a failure from day one in college because they hadn't gotten in or weren't going to an Ivy League school. And just think about, how depressing that is, right? For kids to not even feel proud of going to an amazing school, like the University of Maryland. So there are expectations that we really need to address. And so I think needs to be done, and we're starting to work on this, is first of all, having conversations about mental health. So it's not a topic that's just buried, that has more pressure, but is never exposed or never discussed, or the pressures are never released. And then really just letting people know that the pressures that they're facing, we need to put them in context, right? It's so much harder now to get into these quote unquote top schools than it was when I applied a long time ago. It's just with common apps and with international applicants, literally it's, 1 in 20, 1 in 25 and get into some of these schools. And yet there's so many other great schools that are out there that kids can have wonderful experience. And so helping the generation of parents also appreciate that even though they haven't heard of great schools, like Williams or Amherst or Northeastern or even Northwestern, these are wonderful schools that are fantastic to go to. And so helping just kind of understand the process and hopefully letting people know there are more options than just the usual Ivy League plus. And then we've actually started a new program that talks about career preparedness, leadership, mental health. And it's called our TAAF program, which we named Thriving Asian Leadership Accelerator. It's a college program, and we've just launched it in New York and San Francisco for 100 youth. And the idea is to have a 2-year program where the first year would be the workshops to talk about career advancement, talk about speaking up for yourself, talk about networking skills to be successful in America that frankly our immigrant parents weren't that familiar with, right? They knew to study hard and get good grades, and that worked pretty well in Asia because you got into the top schools, you got the top jobs. But in the US, so much more is about the EQ side of things. And so we wanted to kind of help those kids, in college now who maybe weren't exposed to those kinds of those lessons. And so we've developed this 2-year program where you have workshops in the first year, and in the second year, using our network of corporate partners, we'll be offering mentorships and internships, right, at leading organizations and banks, so that they actually have the experience, build a network, and actually have it on their resume, so they will hopefully be less stressed when they actually apply for those jobs going forward. So, concrete ideas like that are areas that we are piloting and hopefully scaling over time as well.
Yeah, and I also have joked with my children. I'm like, by the time you're applying, college might not even be a thing.
Yeah.
And just like you said, it's very skill based now. Like, what do you need and what do you want to do? And I tell them all the time, and I think you can speak to this, your career is not defined by one job anymore. You're not
Yeah.
in a job for 30 years, but I think it's not the norm right now. So that idea of really helping people develop their leadership skills and also their interests.
Yeah.
We had a career talk at the school for 8th graders, and there was like an FBI agent,
Yeah.
SPCA, insurance, lawyer. And so exposing kids to different career options is amazing that not our parents didn't necessarily, know about or expose us to.
Yeah, I like you're saying, before our immigrant parents just knew the 3 big careers, right? But now there are actually so many other fields that they just weren't familiar with that can be very rewarding. And how wonderful would it be to expose youth in college as they think about these different careers to learn more about what it's like to be a journalist or to be a politician or to be in another different field, and how much would that help their mental health also? I'm not trying to fit into one of these roles, which frankly they were never really that excited about, to really pursue their dreams. I mean, how many Asian American, ex pre-med people are out there, right? Who just ended up going into other areas. My wife was one. I'm one of those. So many people, and I think it's really healthy and good for everybody involved to be able to look at all these options and be able to pursue, their passions and their dreams.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really recommend when we're working with folks is to be very values based, because
Mm,
that is the North Star.
mm,
What job or activity is going to be consistent with those values? Like, do you want to be in this space that, yeah, it may look good for your resume or college application, but you are feeling miserable for,
mhm,
3 to 4 years. And so
mhm.
setting up those expectations so you're not burning out by 25 or 30.
Yeah, I mean, in a prior life when I was pre-med, Stephanie, I actually was thinking about being a psychiatrist, and the area that I would have focused on would have been Asian American topics because we grew up with it, we had unique insights, and we knew there was a huge need out there. So, like I said, I love what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a huge stigma as well that psychiatrists have to tackle, because there's not only stigma about going to therapy, but then there's stigma about taking medications for psychiatric issues. And one thing that I really put out there is, hey, if you had diabetes, like severe
Correct.
diabetes, and you need insulin, like, would you be like, no, doc, I'm not going
Yeah.
to do that. So there's these parallels that we can really draw in our community to kind of break down that barrier. But you and TAAF have done amazing initiatives, and I saw a LinkedIn post recently about There's so many, and fortunately, so many Asian American organizations that have been trying to work on various aspects of the community.
Mm.
And unfortunately, resources seem to be limited, especially in the current climate. How do we come together to have more integration and not again repeat history and have competition even within the nonprofit space?
Yeah. One of the big tenets of TAAF and one of our superpowers is our convening power, our ability to actually bring people together across different sectors, across ethnic groups, across geographies, even across political divide. And that's really important because in the past, our community has been really um, um, harmed because we've been so fragmented. As a
Yeah.
Chinese person, you'll appreciate, you talk to someone who's Chinese, they'll always ask, okay, are you from mainland China or Taiwan or Hong Kong? If you're from mainland China, then you go into what province, what village. We love to be very local, very tribal because we're trying to find our people. But at the end of the day, we have to come together across all these different groups to really build power. And so that's what thing that TAAF has tapped into and really is committed to, creating this big tent to bring people of all different backgrounds to work together. We know that philanthropy is still minuscule for our community compared to other communities. We are 7% of the population and receive only zero point 0.2 or 0.3% of philanthropy. And so actually the pie, we're not competing for the same resource in the same pie. We all need to focus on expanding that pie and making it 10 times, 20 times larger. And that is something that TAAF actually has a unique ability to do because of our networks across companies, across individuals, across partners. We have unique ability to raise the profile of our community and tap into more resources. And that's another area we're going to be leaning into going forward, is actually helping all of these Asian American, frankly, non-Asian American families that are creating wealth in NVIDIA and in tech and finance, and helping them, since they're first time or new to philanthropy, helping them understand, how do I, after I spend my whole life working so hard to make this money, how do I start to enjoy and give it away for philanthropy? And how do I become smart about doing philanthropy? There are a lot of skills and techniques so that we can be really, really strong in terms of as a philanthropist and to run my family office well. So we are going to be looking to help educate people so they can give back to our community like other communities give back to their communities. And so I think trying to focus on just the existing pool of funding is self-defeating. There is so much more resources that are out there that have been untapped. And part of our mission is to really increase awareness and unlock those resources.
And really what you're talking about is, utilizing and leveraging the wealth and the opportunities that many of us have been fortunate to have. And so that is reflected in, belongingness and representation. And
Mm.
so how do you feel that we can also contribute to improving belongingness and getting people involved, even if they don't have a lot of money?
Yeah. So thanks for bringing up belonging. It is something which is really, really important, especially to our community. A lot of Asian American kids, at some point in their lives did not feel like they truly belonged. And our data shows that Asian Americans are the least likely to feel like we belong in this country, only about 23%. So belonging is one of our core goals at TAAF, along with safety and prosperity. And for us, belonging means seeing ourselves better represented on TV, in classrooms, in boardrooms, in all facets of daily life. We know also that seeing Asian Americans at senior positions in society increases a feeling of belonging, right? Also, having less anti-Asian hate makes us feel more like we belong. So a lot of what we do is to try to achieve greater belonging for our community. So yeah, it's an important part of what we do. We are working with groups to promote Asian Americans in movies and films. And we do that primarily by helping develop the next generation of Asian American filmmakers, showrunners, executives. We work with Sundance Film Festival. We work with great organizations like CAPE and CAM and Right Back Rise to increase representation of Asian Americans and develop that talent pool. We're also working with the Asian American Journalists Association to increase Asian American journalists' capabilities and resources. And recently, we're also working to increase Asian Americans on boards. Half of most boards do not have any Asian Americans on them right now. Over half of the Fortune 1000. And so we're working with partners in the space to actively introduce highly qualified candidates who are Asian American so that we have more representation at the board level and all the way down through the whole career ladder.
And sitting at the table is just so important. And what you're speaking to as well is helping people navigate that. So one thing that is a constant question being in a leadership role is, as an Asian American, as a young Asian American, female, how you've been in venture capitalist, medical environments. What are ways that you've been able to mentor, or even for yourself, manage the discomfort of sitting at the table sometimes when, your stimulus value is different? And my colleague and I joke all the time, pretend you're a mediocre white man, but that can only get you so far. So like, how have you been able to sit at that table and assert yourself in ways that sometimes it may rub people the wrong way?
Yeah, I think that's a muscle that our community definitely needs to develop and to build. I think the reality is it ties to, do we think being multicultural and diverse, do we see that as a strength or a weakness? And I think for a lot of Asian Americans growing up in this country, we went through a phase where we were not sure what were the benefits of being different from all the other kids, even in Palo Alto, or even in places like the Bay, which have a fair representation of Asian Americans. Growing up in Maryland, I literally got in debates with my parents as to what were the benefits of being, Chinese American versus just being, white American like everybody else. And so we have to first feel that we have something to offer and that we have that pride in our diversity and the powers of that. And so recently we actually came up with a campaign that you may have seen called Asian Plus American, which is just saying, hey, we used to call ourselves Asian American, and it was a dash and almost like it's a choice between being more Asian, being more American. We hate that question of, are you more American, are you more Asian? Actually, we are better off because we're both. We bring more to the table. And so that attitude is also what we need to bring into our boardrooms, in our meetings, that because I have a different perspective, it's actually a strength, that I have a different viewpoint. Data shows clearly that having more diverse voices to making decisions helps companies perform better. So we are there for a purpose because we have more to add. We have, I'm sure, very impressive background, and we're totally qualified for the role. So therefore, we should be speaking up because that's what people need from us.
I love that. And Asian plus is great. And plus it's not a mouthful when you have to say everything. That brings up another thing though, visibility, because there's pros and cons to visibility. And right now, and I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, not to get super charged in this, but immigration is under attack and people are being made to feel fearful and, scared for their families, for whether they belong or not. The message is being sent at a higher level. So how can we help folks kind of manage that fear, or at least be supportive to them with resources or, mental health support in those aspects?
Yeah, we believe it's really important to fight against this perpetual foreigner stereotype, which really plagues our community. It's affected our community for literally hundreds of years.
Yep.
And so we do that in a couple of ways. Number one is we actually provide support to over 50 organizations across the country that are on the front lines in the major cities where Asian Americans reside, so that if incidents occur, they have resources in those cities to help them either deal with immigration, deal with racism, deal with attacks. They have resources to help them legally, financially, mentally, et cetera. And so that is part of what we call our TAAF safety network, which is, like I said, the largest in the country, in the top 14 cities. And those 14 cities, because Asian Americans tend to congregate in certain areas, cover over 50% of our community in the country. So that's kind of the front line and the resources for those organizations. And they do a lot of know your rights training and violence de-escalation training. And they provide mental health and other support to the community. So that's very important. But, at the higher level, the more upstream level, how do we try to combat this perpetual foreigner stereotype, right? Our data has shown this year that if you ask people, do you think Asian Americans are more loyal to the US or to a country in Asia? 20% used to say people are more loyal to a country in Asia. Now 40% of Americans say that Asian Americans, people like you and I, are more loyal to a country in Asia than to the US, which is just ludicrous but alarming, right? That people really question our loyalties. And it happened, in World War II when people questioned the loyalties of Japanese Americans. So history is, starting to repeat itself. And so how do we then combat those stereotypes and prejudices? We start in the classroom. Education is very important, and we want to make sure that people realize that we have been here for literally hundreds of years. We've contributed tremendously to America's development, and Asian American history is American history. And so we provide support for curriculum development. We have a AAPI History Hub that has 320 lesson plans that people can access. We have a comic book that teaches Asian American history. And we continue to advocate for the teaching of AAPI history in schools across the country. 10 states now mandate the teaching of AAPI history in their schools, K through 12. And we continue to provide support to organizations that are working on teaching and training teachers to teach AAPI history. So it starts in the classroom. We talked about it in the boardroom and also talked about it in Hollywood, making sure that we do have that representation, which is really, really important.
Absolutely. Well, and honing in for yourself, what mental health lessons have you learned going through different aspects of your development in your career?
Yeah, I think for me early on, I realized it felt really good to feel that sense of belonging. And so when I was in Maryland, I always tell this story where I went to a family camp in Pennsylvania for a summer. And for that one magical week each year, we were surrounded by all people who looked like me and who had similar background. It was a Chinese family camp in the Pocono Mountains. And that became my favorite week of the year. I was like, wow, this is where I really feel like I belong. And so going forward, I always remembered that. And part of my desire to not become a doctor was actually to pursue my dream to be in an environment where I truly felt like I belonged. I guess I could have moved to Hawaii, but I wasn't thinking along those lines. So instead I moved to Asia and also to learn more about my heritage and my background. And so I spent literally, as I said, 20 years in Hong Kong, really experiencing Asia and understand what it's like where all the leaders look like me. And it was powerful and really good for me as I thought about my identity, so that when I came back eventually to the US, I had so much more of an understanding and even deeper pride of who I was, and finally understood what my parents were talking about when they said to really be proud of our culture. And so I bring that attitude to my work here at TAAF. And I think a lot of what we're trying to do is foster that sense of belonging, in the US through all of our programming and all of our partnerships.
Absolutely. And I think another thing is, how do we caution our community, though, of being so insular? Because Chinatowns were
Mm,
made because we were trying to uplift our community and
mm,
leverage the resources that we weren't being given.
mm.
So there is a balance there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things we found from our research is that people do perceive that Asian Americans tend to socialize and interact more with other people within our community and not more broadly. And so TAF's mission from the very beginning has always been to try to affect mainstream America, right? Through our work, through our narrative change, through our education, through our advocacy. And so I think you bring up a really important point. There are opportunities. We need to do more to engage with other communities so they can appreciate more about us and we actually can develop personal relationships. And we see that in our status index research, that there are massive opportunities for us to reach out to other communities, Black, white, Latino, to let them understand and see who we are better. We have this perception of being not or cold or less friendly in some cases to some communities, right? But if they ever were to come to your house or my house and join us for a hot pot, they'd realize, how warm and friendly we truly are. And so how do we try to facilitate or have more of those kinds of interactions beyond just our community so that we can build those relationships? I think that's really important. And so one area that we've provided some support in the past, we'd love to do more, is actually how do we foster activities that bring together people from different communities to celebrate food or culture or shared values, shared interests. I think that's really pays off in the long term, and it helps to allow people to overcome stereotypes and see people, as human versus as, as groups.
Yeah, and I think the kids in elementary school, they used to have the Feast of Nations, which I
I
thought
love
was
that.
really
I
cool.
know. Yeah, and I've heard just recently someone saying those international days, right, where they bring different cultures together, were some of their favorite days at school because you really felt like here I'm actually celebrating the diversity, and it becomes a positive versus any kind of perceived negative.
Absolutely. Well, pretend I am brand new or someone is brand new to the Asian American Foundation and wants to get involved. Like what would you suggest?
What I like to do is always ask people about their personal Asian American stories so they can share more about what their background is and what's most important to them. People have different interests, but within our broad umbrella of safety, belonging, and prosperity, there's always something that people with, right? Either they want to make our community safer, or they want to make sure we're better represented, or they want to make sure that people have more success in their careers, or that small businesses have more access to capital. So I really try to understand what's a priority for them. And then we typically like them just to experience TAAF, so have them join our events so they can experience the kind of magic that happens when we bring together our community from all these different walks of life, and oftentimes for the first time to talk about issues that are so important to us. So our Youth Mental Health Summit allowed people to come together across all walks of life. And people were struck by the diversity of the people we had in the room. It wasn't just medical health practitioners like yourself. We had academics, we had corporate folks, we had influencers and celebrities, and then we had government folks. That is, again, that diversity, even within our own culture, makes it so rich to talk about our different experiences and also our shared experience. So really recommend that people come together and join at our events, talk about the areas that you're most passionate about, and then we'll find ways to get more involved, right? Everybody has their unique background, unique resources, unique networks, unique capabilities. And we do want to build a movement across our country and move beyond just kind of the moment of anti-Asian hate.
And you're really talking about intersectionality and especially
Mhm.
bringing in all these different groups of people, which is very parallel to this show. And mental health
Yes.
is a common thread among any profession or person. And that's really amazing. So, any new initiatives to tell people about that they could get excited about, and how can they, learn more about TAAF?
Yeah. So, like I said, one of our most recent initiatives has been our youth initiative, the TALA program, and we'll be expanding that across the country over time. But again, 100 kids right now in New York and San Francisco, and right now we're in the first year of implementing our workshops, and then in the second year we'll be implementing mentorships and internships. So very, very excited about that. Some of those kids or youth who are in that program, Stephanie, actually came to our conference and spoke at our conference, and they were just so inspiring, so articulate, and so we're delighted to have them there. We're also working with small businesses, so actually working on programs to provide more capital to small businesses in New York City in particular, and in Seattle. Those are our two TAAF cities where we're launching our more place-based initiatives. So we'll be doing a little bit more in Seattle and New York. But over time, we look to expand to cities like San Francisco and LA and others to do more local-based programming. So I would say the best way to get involved is check out our website, sign up or follow our socials, and then please sign up for our newsletter to get a better sense of what we do. And reach out to us and let us know, where you have interests or you have resources, or you have ideas that really can be impactful. We're always looking for ideas that are what we call highly impactful, but also highly scalable, right? Because then if we can demonstrate proof of concept, we can then roll them out around the country. And so really very open to, talking to members of the community, learning from their experiences, and then finding ways to create solutions that impact more people.
Well, Norman, thank you so much for sharing all your insights. And, it's just been an amazing conversation. The time flew by. I look and I was like, wow, we've covered so much. So thank you so much for all the work that you do and the organization. And I appreciate ongoing collaboration.
Likewise, thanks, Dr. Wong. Really a pleasure to meet you and look forward to seeing you for a meal in the Bay Area.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We would love for you to subscribe to the podcast and join our community on all our socials at colorsuccesspodcast.com. Looking forward to you checking out my memoir, Cancel the Filter, Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and Working Mother of Color on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I'd love to hear your Cancel the Filter moments.